And there's proof in writings through history that it's not what the creators of the Constitution intended. You would not want to make this government with great powers have the ability to do whatever they wanted to do with the money, with the general welfare of the people, and then limit their powers, and then put the Bill of Rights in to list that our rights that are given to us through natural law and our Creator. And then even on top of that, put the 9th Amendment, which talks about the rights not enumerated. Even though they didn't list the rights, it doesn't mean it's not a right, and you still have the right. And then the 10th Amendment that says everything that's not listed in the Constitution up to this point belongs to the states. If anybody's going to stand here today and tell me that the Founding Fathers wrote Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 for common defense and general welfare with unlimited federal powers of spending for whatever they wanted, you're lying to yourself. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Constitutional Corner. I'm your host, Craig McMichael, along with Mark Hogan.
Hello, everybody.
I would like to welcome everybody. If you're a first-time viewer, thank you so much for stopping by. If you're a return viewer, thank you also. For everybody, please make sure you like and subscribe and share this video. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints about anything we're going to say today, you can always email us at studio13media@gmail.com.
Right, or leave the comments. We want to hear from you.
We do want to hear. Mark, today we're going to talk about Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 of the United States Constitution, also known as the General Welfare Clause. Can you read that for us?
Be glad to. Article 1, Section 8, Clause. Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, impose and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties imposed and excised shall be uniform throughout the United States.
So that's an interesting clause. That's the first one they put in what's known as the enumeration of the Constitution, the 18 powers gifted to the government from the states, because the states gave the federal government their powers. And that's really kind of morphed over the years. So before we get into the actual history of the founders and what they believed, let's talk about where this has grown and what it's become today.
Right.
Some of the numbers that I pulled from 2021 that would be under the general welfare would be foreign aid. I don't know many people that would agree with foreign aid. It's basically they take your tax money and they send it to other countries.
Well, there's a lot of two sides to those stories.
And you'd be amazed by what they do in the other countries sometimes. They're buying cars, swimming pools, they're bribing people to do what the U.S. government wants. We get involved in political regime changes in other countries.
Right.
That was $38 billion officially as of last year, just last year alone.
2021.
$38 billion taken from American citizens and sent to people around the world to do things that we're not entirely sure what was done with it. Some of the others that are known as actual welfare programs, you have a tax credit. That was $140 billion, which fascinates me. They tax the money and then decide to give $140 billion back, and some sort of credit is like, gee, thank you, government master, overlord man.
For my own money. I hear people all the time going, I'm getting a $3,000 refund, yay. Well, that's your money.
For some people, and what's interesting about this is if you look at the tax code, the top 1% pay well over 50% of the taxes. So there are a lot of people that actually pay no federal income tax or no taxes because they get so much of a refund. They get more back than they actually put into the system, which really is strange when you start talking about equality. How is that equal? How is our liberty being protected when other citizens are getting money from us for just being here in this country?
Right. Well, what about all the rich don't pay their fair share? Doesn't that explain that?
No, that's a propaganda tool used by certain people in political parties. Now, the rich don't pay their fair share because they don't have income. There are loopholes in the system that could be closed up. And, you know, a lot of times with taxes, you could talk about a fair tax or a flat tax. And we could have an episode and really break into those two different taxing codes. We've already spoken a little bit about the 16th Amendment and how they found that Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 didn't give them the proper power for an income tax. That's really where a lot of that comes from. The wealthy people in this country are paying taxes. They're paying way more than most of us pay. It's really the middle class that doesn't have the ability to access the loopholes.
Well, it's just an attempt at class warfare, division, and they do that on a lot of fronts.
The government is classic for that. They have segregated us, the divide and conquer method. They put us into categories, gender categories, race categories, educational categories, people with kids, without kids, people that are married or not married. They want to split you into a category. That way we can't stand united as a people and demand our liberties and freedoms. Another one that I found interesting was the SNAP, which is the food stamps. That's $134 billion. This one's always fascinated me because people need to eat, people are hungry, but it used to be the local communities and churches and charities took care of this. It's not an issue for the federal government to handle under the General Welfare Clause. And it actually used to be a stamp. You go and you could get specific items from the grocery store. And now we give people a debit card. They can pull out whatever they want. I think in some states I was reading stories of ATMs across from strip clubs are accessed by the food stamp cards more than anywhere else.
Well, do I want to get a pack of bologna or one more table dance?
Yeah. Or go in and buy a steak and then go outside and sell it for $3 because you just want some money for whatever you want money for.
I've been approached in convenience stores.
Yeah.
Give me a 50% on the dollar or something like that,
Yeah, it's interesting. Like with every government program, when you give the government the authority and the power, it gets abused. And it's not always the government abusing it. Normally it is. But people will take advantage of the system. And I think we all, if we're honest with ourselves, have seen that in our society at some point or another, that somebody was taking advantage of that system.
Well, nobody's saying there shouldn't be a safety net for, I think all this started with very young children, orphans, and the elderly. And it's branched out from there over the last couple of hundred years.
Like Social Security. Social Security, when it was started, was you pay into a system. When you reach a certain age, you get the money back.
Right.
And now spouses get Social Security. If you die early, your kids, if they're under 18, can get your Social Security. They've branched it out where everybody can access these funds. And a lot of it is for political votes. They want people, hey, you vote for me, I'm going to make sure you get what you need to survive.
Vote for Santa Claus, right?
Vote for Santa Claus. Another one that's part of the welfare system is the housing, where they actually give money and housing assistance to help people find a home. And this sounds great, charitable, but I don't understand how constitutionally our federal government can take your tax money from your pocket and give it to your neighbor so they can buy a house. I own a house. I have a VA loan, fortunately. That made it a little easier to get a house, but I served 10 years in the Marine Corps to qualify for that VA loan. Why is it the government's responsibility to take tax money and assist someone with getting a home? I just don't see how that is something that's reasonable or fair. And if you're one of these people that have utilized one of these programs, I'm not attacking you as a person. The program's there. I don't blame you for using it. I blame the people that don't stand up and fight against the programs to shut them down. Why can't a local community, Homes for Heroes or some of these other programs that build homes for people?
Well, unfortunately, it's become a generational thing in a lot of communities. And they know exactly how to work it because their mom did and their grandmom did, and they know how it works. Where they meet that threshold, when their benefits start dropping off, they will stop right there. And they may not want to take that raise at work or get that better job because they're going to lose their benefits. It happens all the time.
Yeah. And so altogether, besides Medicaid, there are 13 federal programs that are considered under the welfare. Those total $535 billion taxpayer dollars every single year. Medicare is another monster all in itself. It's $521 billion. And an interesting story, some people don't know, but some do. My wife's from the Ukraine. Obviously, Ukraine's at war right now. I had to bring her parents over here. We were fortunate. They had a visa, so they were able to get in the country for 6 months. The government offered a temporary protective status, so I've applied for that, which will allow them to stay for 18 months. But we're curious about medical. I'm not having a good time finding medical programs for people over 65 because Medicare. Why would a private insurance company offer something that the government offers because they can't compete with the
Right.
federal government. And so if this war drags on and my wife's parents stay here and God forbid something happen and I have to take them to the hospital, what do? I mean, I know the hospital will see them. The whole thing under Obamacare where, people are dying on the streets was just nonsense. Hospitals aren't allowed to turn people away whether they have insurance or not.
Well, they've got to create a boogeyman to save everybody from.
Yeah, it's always an emergency. We talked
It's
about
always an emergency.
the last episode, an emergency. So let's dig in a little bit and let's talk about the founders. And we're going to talk about a lot of different founders here and a lot of different things they said. There were a lot of debates during the Constitutional Convention. And general welfare was never meant to be an unlimited power for the government. They actually took that term from the Articles of Confederation. In that time period, between the war and the ratification of the Constitution, the government ran under the Articles of Confederation. The articles stated how the states had bond together in a friendly union to support each other in the common defense and general welfare of each state. That's kind of what they meant by this. That's kind of where they were going. And so what a lot of founders, when you read their writings, what they'll say is general welfare is the first qualifying statement of the enumeration. What does that mean, Craig?
What does that mean, Craig?
Yeah, well, that basically means they're qualifying the other 17 enumerated powers through this one. It does not grant the government the ability to do whatever they see fit through raising taxes and spending money for the general welfare of people. If that was the case, if the founders were writing the Constitution and they got to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, and they wrote, okay, they can raise taxes, in post, ex post, spend money for the common defense and general welfare, what would be the point of writing anything beyond that? You basically just gave yourself a dictator like they got out of with Britain, with unlimited powers to tax, spend, and do whatever they wanted to do.
Right.
We all know the founders would not want to do this. Madison famously said, it's not a grant of power at all for the common defense or the general welfare. It's a reference or guide for the other enumerated powers. And so, you could argue with that. I have a hard time. Madison is considered the father of the Constitution. He pretty much wrote most of it down. They pulled these things from the state constitutions and the Articles of Confederations.
Fourth president, correct?
Madison was the fourth president of the United States. I believe, if my order's correct, it's Washington, Adams, Jefferson, and Madison. All founders, all great comments about this. Another thing, Madison in 1831, after he was president until 1817, I believe. He said the general welfare was not unlimited. If it was unlimited, it would metamorphose the government. And there's proof in writings through history that it's not what the creators of the Constitution intended. You would not want to make this government with great powers have the ability to do whatever they wanted to do with the money, with the general welfare of the people, and then limit their powers, and then put the Bill of Rights in to list that our rights that are given to us through natural law and our Creator, and then even on top of that put the Ninth Amendment, which talks about the rights not enumerated. Even though they didn't list the rights, it doesn't mean it's not a right, and you still have the right. And then the 10th Amendment that says everything that's not listed in the Constitution up to this point belongs to the states. If anybody's going to stand here today and tell me that the Founding Fathers wrote Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 for common defense and general welfare with unlimited federal powers of spending for whatever they wanted, you're lying to yourself. And if that hurts your feelings, I'm sorry. You could write me about it. I love comments and complaints. You could go back to the Federalist Papers. And so a lot of people don't know, they haven't read the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers are really where some of the Founding Fathers were describing the Constitution to the states. They were writing papers about what the Constitution was going to grant. Federalist 41, Madison said, what's the purpose of the other enumerated powers if the general welfare gave unlimited power to the government? Can't be any clearer than that statement.
Right. All you got to do is go back to what the founders were arguing about and writing and how they debated on these issues to know what they meant.
Yeah, it's all there. It's all clear as day. In today's time, I don't understand why people don't know with the internet. I mean, it's easy to find this. You have to be careful and make sure you don't find somebody's opinion piece or hit piece on this. You can find their actual writing verbatim and read it to try to understand what they were talking about.
And you can agree or disagree, but you can know what they were talking about and what they said.
You can agree or disagree, unless your disagreement takes away my liberty and freedom, and then your disagreement means nothing to me.
Exactly.
Federalist 45. Powers not delegated by the Constitution are few, or powers delegated by the Constitution are few and defined. Madison said this. The powers delegated to the states are numerous and indefinite. Basically what they're saying is they've given limited powers to our federal government to do what they've specified in Article 1, Section 8. And everything else falls to the states. However, the people, and there's a point to this. When's the last time you were anywhere and you met one of your federal representatives? How many of you watching today can honestly say you've met a U.S. congressman or a U.S. senator, shaken their hand, talked to them, understood what kind of person they are, know what their beliefs are? Hell, it's hard enough to meet a state representative. How many of you have met a state representative, shaken their hand, had a conversation with them, actually understood where they stand as a person and as a fellow citizen on your liberties and freedoms? This is what the federal or the founders realized when they were writing the Constitution. They didn't want an overbearing federal power that was just able to grow and consume everything, because we the people would not be able to stop it or control that.
Right, and just tax everybody with no retribution and spend the money how they saw fit and call it general welfare.
Yeah, and you can go even further in Federalist 83. Hamilton actually states, and the verbiage that he uses to me is interesting. He says absurd, it would be absurd and useless if the general authority was intended. Basically, weeding between that, he's saying if the general authority was giving the government the right of unlimited powers, writing the rest of the Constitution would be useless.
Right, moot point.
There'd be no point in it. They wrote it for a reason. They wrote it not to be tricky with their words, not to try to lead people down the wrong path. I think from researching, around 80% of the population in the Revolutionary time was literate. They could read and write. 80%. That kind of matches today's numbers, says something about our education system. They knew the people would read these documents. They knew that they would be able to understand what freedoms and liberties were being granted to them. Thomas Jefferson in 1817 said the Congress had not unlimited powers. They were restrained to the enumerated powers. This conversation actually came up because in 1817, Madison was president, our fourth president, you mentioned earlier, the father of the Constitution. While he was president, Congress passed what was known as an infrastructure bill at the time. So this bill was going to improve roads and canals. And Madison wrote letters to people where he openly talks about how he personally supports this bill. He thinks that this needs to be done, but it's a violation of the Constitution that the government under the General Welfare Clause does not have the authority to raise this money and spend on these types of items. So in his last day of office in 1817, the founder of the Constitution, the father of the Constitution, vetoed an infrastructure bill because he viewed it to be unconstitutional. And this would blow people's minds today. They spend trillions of dollars on infrastructure. And people say, well, Craig, we need roads. We need to get around. I agree with you 100%. But why not let the state tax you and the state build their roads? An interesting story I've learned over the years is we're in Texas, for those of y'all that are new to the show and do not know. If you ever have the chance to drive to Louisiana, a lot of their roads are pretty bad in Louisiana. And I've always wondered why, and so I did some research and figured it out. Have you ever heard this story,
No.
Mark? Yeah, so the federal government wanted the drinking age raised to 21. As we've discussed in previous episodes, the federal government can't force a state to do something. So Louisiana refused. They left their drinking age at 18, which people would debate. I mean, at 18, you can be drafted in the military or you can serve in the military. You can carry a gun and engage foreign enemies, but you can't drink a beer. So that's a debate for another time. As punishment, the federal government stopped the road funds to Louisiana.
Really?
That is why their roads got so left behind for so long, because they fought this federal power. The other states just went along with it. They raised their drinking age because this is what the government does. They dangle that carrot. And what's fascinating is the carrot is your tax money. They tax the people
Right.
of the state.
You want some of your money back? You're going to have to jump through our hoops.
They take the money from you, they put it in the government coffers, and then they come up with these ideas and these proposals that, hey, we'll give you your money back because we're so generous today if you do what we want you to do. And this is, the states really need to start working on this, start looking at the federal power, maybe some nullification, some overreach. These are just some of the examples of what the founders have talked about with general welfare. There are many more that you can find on your own. We might even do another episode on taxation, the bank. A lot of people don't know this. We have the Federal Reserve. There was the first Bank of the United States of America. There was the second Bank of the United States of America. They've tried this experiment before and it's failed. They took our money off the gold standard.
Right. In 68 or 69?
68 or 69, Eisenhower made the highway system. Johnson implemented the welfare state, where, I could be wrong in this, but I believe it was, if a father wasn't in a home, the single mother could get more money or something along those lines.
Right. And so what did that create? That created more fatherless homes. And people are paying for that. The incentive was to help people out, single mothers. Everybody agrees with that. But when you start putting the bureaucracy in place to apply to everyone, you will get the incentive that you may not have been aiming for to begin with.
Yeah, you're right on that, Mark. And that's what I like to remind people is you're working hard to provide for your family. And I'm not cold-hearted. I care about people. I don't want to see people suffer. But I can't control choices people make in their life, and I can't fix the world. It's not fair for the government to take money from hardworking, everyday American citizens so they can't provide for their families and give it to other people for political support and gain. An example of this, we like to call them the Obama phones, but they're not really the Obama phones.
That started during the Reagan era.
And this is a good example of people that get too political in politics. I'm not talking about a left or right, and I mentioned this before. Reagan actually mentioned this. There's not a left and right as a choice in politics. There's an up and down. You can either go up into prosperity or down to the anthill of tyranny.
I don't know any country that's lifted their poverty class out of poverty by massive handouts.
No, I don't like talking about other governments, but the Democratic People's Republic in Eastern Germany in the 40s and 50s is a great example. I love how the communist socialist states always use the word democratic and republican. Right. They always throw the good words in there.
Sure.
These people starved to death because they try to implement Soviet-style shared misery is what I call it. Everybody suffers because everybody has the same. That's the equity you hear in the news today. There's no such thing as equity. There's no way to make things equal amongst everybody. They can make it equal amongst us while they live a good life. If you look at your federal leaders in Washington, they live a pretty good life. A lot of them are committing insider trading. A lot of them are doing things that you wouldn't agree with. And a lot of them are doing things that if you did in your life, you'd probably be arrested and charged with a crime. Right. So yeah, Reagan started the phone program, and originally it was for good cause. That's the problem with this welfare, and a lot of the things they do is it's always for good cause. They wanted to make sure that people had the ability to contact emergency services if their home was on fire or if they needed police. Great, I agree, but that's not something the federal tax money should be used for.
Yeah, I mean, I've got friends that say, well, you don't like socialism, we're already socialists because we have police and firefighters and government health care. That doesn't qualify as socialism.
Yeah, it's not quite social. The government health care is something we definitely could dig into on another day. That's about all I got on the general welfare. I mean, I've hit a road on this one.
Yeah. Well, it saps incentive. So we could probably do a whole nother show on this. But right now, I'd like to say thank you all for being here. This is a good show. Thank you, Craig, for all your thoughtful insight and putting up with my stumbling about. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell, all over the place. That's how we see it. What do you think?